equations, okay? The directions on the test are going to say solve the following equations and inequalities. So we looked at linear equations, problems 1 through 3. We looked at absolute value equations, multivariable equations, linear inequalities, absolute value inequalities when your answer is a disjunction or when your answer is a conjunction. We looked at solving a linear system by the substitution method and solving a linear system by the linear combination method. Okay, so now moving on, we're now going to jump. We're still, guys, listen to me. We're still in the section where we're solving equations and inequalities. Okay, I will tell you when we switch out of that section. All right, so moving on. Here we go. Problem number 12. Solve the given three variable system. Okay, problem number 12. Here we go. Now, first of all, your goal is to eliminate the x's or the y's or the z's. Now, when I look at the x's, they're not going to be easy to eliminate. You got a 3, a 2, and a 5. Same thing with your z's. You've got a 4, a 3, and a 5. But look at your y's. You've got a 1 here. You could easily multiply this middle equation by a 2 to give you a negative 2. And then you could multiply the middle equation by 3 or negative 3 to give you a positive 3 here. So I'm going to try to eliminate my y's. Okay? So you have to do that 2 times. You have to pick out 2 equations, eliminate the y's, then pick out 2 other equations and eliminate the y's. Now you can eliminate the x's or the z's if you want to, and that's okay. Alright, but I chose the y's. Looks like the easiest to me, so I'm going to take the top equation or the middle equation. I'm going to work with these 2 equations here. I'm going to multiply the middle equation here, equation number 2, by 2. So I will have 4x, negative 2y, positive 6z equals 8. Okay? I multiplied everything by 2. The top equation is going to stay the same. Okay? Now, that's 11 right there. Now, add these 2 equations together and see what we get. These cancel. 3 plus 4 is 7x. 4 plus 6 is 10. 11 plus 8 is 19. So look what you did. You came up with one equation that has only x's and z's. Okay? Good job. Now, I'm going to pick out 2 other equations and eliminate y again. Okay? How about these 2 equations here? If I multiply this middle equation right here by a negative 3, that'll give me a positive 3 right here, because a negative times a negative 1 is a positive 3, and that'll cancel with my negative 3. So here we go. Negative 3 times 2, negative 6. Negative 3 times negative 1, positive 3. Negative 3 times positive 3, negative 9z. Negative 3 times 4, negative 12. And there we go. Okay? Now your bottom equation stays the same, so 5x minus 3y plus 5z equals negative 1. Now let's combine. Negative 6 positive 5 is negative 1x, or negative x, positive 5, negative 9, negative 4z equals negative 13. Now students, look what you've accomplished. You have 2 equations now that have x's and z's. We know how to solve this system right here. We did that back here and back here. Okay? So we can now use substitution or eliminate linear combination on these 2 equations. That's totally up to you. Okay? I think I'm going to use linear combination. Okay? I see that I have a 7 right here and a negative 1 here. So if I multiply this equation here by 7, that'll give me a negative 7 there. So 7 times negative 1, negative 7, 7 times negative 4, negative 28. 7 times negative 13, negative 91. Bring over your top equation. Positive 7, positive 10z equals 19. These cancel, leaving you with negative 18. And let's see, 20, 71, 72, negative 72. Alright. Divide both sides by negative 18. And you get 4. 18 times 4 is 72. A negative divided by a negative is positive, and 72 divided by 18 is 4. So now the rest is pretty much very simple to do. I mean, you're going to pick up this 4 and put it in for x. Here, or here, or here, or here. It doesn't matter. I'm going to do it here because I have space to work, okay? So here's my x. So negative 1 from right here. Then for x, I'm going to put a 4. Then negative 4z. And then equals negative 13. Okay? Negative times positive is negative 4. Bring down the rest of the problem. Now bring your 4 over and make it a, and this should be different. Hold on, this should work out. Okay, students, I'm back. Everything's fine. So bring the negative 4 over, make it a positive 4. So we're left with negative 4z equals negative 9. Divide both sides by a negative 4. Negative divided by a negative is positive. 9 divided by 4 would be, let's see, 2 1/4, or 2, 0.25, or 2 1/4, okay? There we go. So now just take c and x and substitute them up here in for x and z, and we'll be done. We can solve for y. So 5 times x, which is 4, negative 3y, positive 5 times. No, I'm gonna put 9 over 4, guys. 9 over 4 is a lot easier to use when you're gonna multiply instead of 2 1/4. Okay. So here's what you get. 20, negative 3y, positive 45 over 4 equals negative 1. Now every student is different. I would much rather eliminate fractions. I really would. Then try to work with this fraction here. So I'm going to multiply everything by 4 to get rid of my fraction. 80, negative 12, positive 45, negative 4. Now combine your two numbers here, positive 80, positive 45, and we're left with positive 125. Okay, now bring the 125 over and make it negative. And we're left with negative 12y equals negative 129. Alright, my pen's not working very well. There we go. Now, divide both sides by a negative 12, and y would equal, well, a negative divided by a negative is positive, and 129 divided by 12 is just 129 over 12. So you write your final answer like this. Here's your x, here's your y, and here's your z. Alright? And that's it. Use these steps, guys, and you'll be fine solving a 3-variable linear system. Alright? Okay, moving on. Number 13. Solving a matrix equation. Here we go. First of all, we're trying to find a matrix that goes right here, so that when you take this matrix here times this matrix here and then subtract this matrix here, you get this. Okay, so Here's what you have to do if you want to write down steps. First of all, you must isolate the matrix that is the coefficient of the x. Okay? In other words, you must get the x and its matrix all by itself. So I'm going to bring this matrix over. It's a negative matrix. I'm going to bring it over and make it a positive matrix. Okay? So now I have this on the right side. Negative 8 plus 10, 2. 5 plus negative 3, 2. There we go. And I'm left over here with just my matrix and x. Alright? That's the first thing you must do, is isolate this matrix. The second thing you must do is find the inverse of this matrix right here that's with the x. You must find the inverse of that matrix. Okay? Find the inverse of this matrix. Do you remember how to do that? Here we go. Hopefully you do, okay? Let's find the inverse of that matrix. First thing you do is you find the determinant. Find the determinant. Multiply up, that's 2. So you change the sign. Multiply down, you get a 0. Combine, you get a negative 2. So there's the determinant. Got it? Next, you take this determinant and you flip it. So negative 2 is really negative 2 over 1. Flip that and you get negative 1/2. Okay? Negative 1/2. Let's review. Find the determinant. Flip it. Write it here. Then these two numbers here, you change their signs. So 2 becomes negative. 1 becomes negative. You do not move them. These two numbers, you do not change their signs. You just swap places. So 4 goes up here. 0 comes down here. Now take your negative 1/2 and multiply it through. Negative 1/2 times 4. Negative 2. Negative 1/2 times negative 1. Positive 1/2. Negative 1/2 times negative 2. Positive 1. Negative 1/2 times 0. 0. So there you found the inverse matrix. Got it? You found the inverse matrix. So you take this inverse matrix right here, and here's what you do with it. You multiply it by both sides. And I did not want to do that. You multiply it by both sides of the equation. But students, the inverse matrix must come first in your multiplication. It must, or you will miss the problem. So, notice I put the inverse matrix first here. Notice I put the inverse matrix first here also, okay? Now, here, trust me, there's no multiplying to do. When you take a matrix times a matrix, when you take a matrix times its inverse, you get out the identity matrix like this. Now listen to me, students. That's basically the same thing in an equation as them canceling out. So you're just left with x. Now over here you gotta do the math. Remember, you have to run your test. You have a 2 by 2 times a 2 by 1. Got it? Your inside numbers must match, and they do. Your outside numbers is the answer you're going to get out. So you're going to get out a 2 by 1. Okay, this is all review. We should know this. So a 2 by 1 looks like this. 2 rows, 1 column. Okay? So here we go. We take row times column. Okay? Row times column. So here we go. Negative 2 times 2. Negative 4. Negative 2 times 2. Negative 4. 1/2 times 2 is positive 1. Negative 4 plus 1, negative 3. Now take row times column, okay? So 1 times 2 is positive 2. 0 times 2 is 0. Combine those and you get a 2. And there's your answer. Okay, so let's review. The first thing you do is you isolate the matrix that's next to the x. You isolate this whole term. So I brought this matrix over and made it a positive. Okay? Then after I did that, I got this matrix right here. When I combine these two matrices here, I got this right here. So the next step was for me to find the inverse matrix of this matrix here. So I found the inverse. Here it is. And I multiplied it by this side. And I also multiplied it by this side over here. Okay? And notice my inverse matrix came first. So I did all of this work to do this. Are you ready? Watch this carefully. So what I'm telling you is this. If you take this matrix here, 0, 2, 1, 4, and multiply it by x, which is this right here, and then subtract this right here, you will get negative 8, 5. You can check that with your calculator if you know how to enter matrices into your calculator, okay? And you can check it and make sure that's the right answer. Alright, moving on. Numbers, and that was number what? That was number 13. Did I never put that? I'm sorry if I didn't, guys. Number 13. Number 14 coming up, okay? Now this is from your last test. We're going to solve quadratic equations, okay? So, we're going to solve this quadratic equation by using the square root method. Square root method, okay? So remember how to do that? Do you remember how to do that? First of all, you get the squared variable, m squared. You get it all by itself, okay? So now remember, listen guys, the square root method only works when you don't have an m term or an x term, okay? We have an m squared term but no m term, so we can use the square root method. So bring the negative 3 over and make it a positive 3. So I'm left with 7m squared equals 14, okay? Now divide both sides by 7. M squared equals 2. Divide both sides by 7. Now, we can take the square root of both sides. So the square root, well, the square root of m squared, of course, is m. And the square root of 2 is 1.4. Now, don't forget, and a lot of you forgot this on your last test, positive, negative. Positive, negative is very important, okay? So there's the answer. Square root method. Guys, please listen to me. All of these equations are going to get mixed together on your test. I'm intentionally going to scramble them up to make you know how to look at an equation and know what type it is. Do you recognize this as a quadratic equation? One of your variables has a power of 2 and there's no higher exponents. That's a quadratic equation. Number 15. On the test, if I give you an equation like this, you should know right away that's a quadratic equation. How do you know that? Because you have an x squared variable, or a variable that's squared. It doesn't have to be an x, whatever letter it is, and you have no other powers higher than that. That is a quadratic equation, okay? Now we're going to use the completing the square method. So here we go. Step 1 is to move all of the x squared and the x terms to one side, and all the constant terms to the other side. So I'm going to leave my x squared and my x terms here and bring the 180 over and make it negative. Does everybody understand step 1? Step 1 is to move all of your x squared and your x terms to one side and your constant terms to the other side. Step 2, divide the entire equation by your x squared coefficient, or we call that your a. Divide everything by your a, okay? Divide by 5, divide by 5, divide by 5, and we're left with x squared, negative 12x, negative 36. Okay? Step 3, take your b, or your x term coefficient, whatever you want to call it, and you multiply it by 1/2. And then whatever you get out, you square it. So now by the way, you can use negative 12, but you don't have to, because you're going to square it anyways, which will always give you out a positive number over here, but that's up to you. I'm just going to take 12. So I take 12 and I multiply it by 1/2 and I get 6. Then I square 6 and I get 36. Okay? So whatever I get right here, I add that to both sides. So I'm going to add 36 to the left side. becomes a 0. Alright? Does everybody see what I did? I added 36 to the left side. I added 36 to the right side. The next step is to factor this left side. Now, I showed you a shortcut that only works when you're completing the square. And I told you to take the square root of this term. The square root of x squared is x. So you put an x here and an x here. Then you take the square root of your c term, or your constant term. And the square root of 36 is 6. So you put a 6 here and a 6 here. And then whatever your middle sign is right here, you put that sign here and here. If this would have been a positive, then this will be a positive, and this will be a positive. Moving on. Now, what I tell you to do next is to your two parentheses will always match. So you erase one of them and you write it with a power of 2. Okay? There we go. Now, the next step, and remember, if I'm going too fast, just pause the video and write stuff down. Okay, guys? Next step, take the square root of both sides. So when you take the square root of something squared, it's like they cancel each other out, leaving you with x minus 6. But if you take the square root of one side, you must take the square root of the other side. And the square root of 0 is 0. Now, usually, don't forget this, guys, on your exam. Excuse me. Usually you put plus minus, and you can do that if you want. But with 0, it doesn't matter. Because positive 0 is 0, negative 0 is 0. Okay? Alright, now, move the 6 over and make it a positive 6. And we're done. 0 plus 6 is 6. X equals 6. Now, most quadratic equations have 2 answers, okay? Like, look at the last answer right here. 2 answers, positive 1/4, negative 1/4, but every now and then there's an equation, a quadratic equation, that has 1 answer. And sometimes they have no solution, okay? Alright, moving on. Number 16. We're going to use the quadratic formula. Number 16, okay? So here we go. Remember, never, ever use the quadratic formula, and that's one side's equal to 0. So bring your 4t squared over and make it a negative 4. Bring your t over and make it a negative t, and you're left with 2t squared. Here you have a negative 2 and a negative 1. Don't forget there's a negative 1 there. So negative 3t, and then positive 2 equals 0. Alright, so there. I took my quadratic equation. By the way, let's stop. On the test, would you recognize that as a quadratic equation? I hope so, guys. One of your variables has a power of 2, and that's the highest exponent you have. That's a quadratic equation. Okay, time for the quadratic formula. You must know this for your test. Negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, this is your a, this is your b, and this is your c. Now, on the test that you guys recently took, there was a student who had a problem like this. It was similar to this, and they had their stuff out of order. They had like positive 2 first, and then positive 2t squared next, and then negative 3t here. Now, that's totally fine. I have no problem with that. But they called this a, this b, and this c. Look, I don't care what order your terms are in. The squared, the t squared term is always going to be your a. The t term is always going to be your b. And the constant term is always going to be your c. Okay? Alright. So to be honest with you, it's probably a good idea to write this in order over here in standard form. But that's up to you. Alright, here we go. So b is a negative 3. I've got a negative sign here, so negative 3 is a positive 3. Plus minus the square root of b squared. B is negative 3. When you square negative 3, you get 9. Negative 4 is next. Then do AC in your head. 2 is A, 2 is C, 2 times 2 is 4. All over 2A. 2 times A is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Next. Now, be very careful here, guys. I have a negative 4 and a positive 4. So a negative 4 times a positive 4 gives me a negative 16. So 9 minus 16, or positive 9, negative 16 is negative 7. All over 4. Now, Listen, students, I'm not going to be as nice on the final exam. Some of you did not do what I told you to do. You left your answer like this. Well, first of all, you have a negative radicand, so make it positive and put an I right here. And then some of you left it that way. You are to divide this up into two fractions. So you have a 3 and a 4 right here. A positive 3 and a positive 4. That's a positive 3/4. And then you put a plus minus. Then you have this fraction right here. So square root of 7 over 4. And then put the I right here. And that is the proper way to write your answer. Okay. Now let's practice a couple more of these. Just one more, okay? On this one here, you can use whatever method you want to use, okay? Now I want to point out to you, you have an n squared term. And that's the highest exponent you have. So you know right away you have a quadratic equation, okay? Now the next thing I want to show you is, anytime you can use the square root method, do it. It is by far the easiest method, okay? But remember, you can only use this method if there's no m term, or in this case, no n term. And unfortunately, there is an n term here and here. So you cannot use the square root method, so you're left with the quadratic formula or complete the square. Alright? So I'm going to use the quadratic formula. That's just me. That's what I like to use. Okay, let's come over here and get a quick copy of this if we can. And that's not going to work, is it? Might be better just to draw it myself. Alright, there we go. Now, remember, never use the quadratic formula unless one side is equal to 0. So bring your 4n squared over and make it a negative 4n squared. Bring your negative n over and make it a positive n. Bring your negative 4 over and make it a positive 4. Okay? 13 negative 4 is 9. Positive 11, positive 1 is positive 12. Negative 9, positive 4, negative 5. There we go. A, B, C. So I have a negative sign. B is 12, so negative 12. Plus minus the square root of b squared. B is 12, so 144. Minus 4ac, so negative 4. And then ac, 9, negative 5. That's negative 45. All over 2a. A is 9. 2 times 9, 18. Okay? Now, next, I have a negative times a negative will give me a positive, and 4 times 45 would be 180. Okay? So I have positive 144 and positive 180. And that's going to give me 320. Actually, I'm not sure why I put this here. I have a positive 144 and a positive 180. It's going to give me a positive 324. Alright, and I think 324 is a perfect square. Let me type that into my calculator and see what I get. Alright, so the square root of 324. So let's see here, students, the square root of 324. Let's see if that's a perfect square. 18, yes. So now I have negative 12 plus minus or positive negative 18 all over 18. Now, split this up into two fractions. Don't try don't try shortcuts where you start crossing things off. Just take your time and do what's right here. Negative 12, take your positive sign, positive 18 all over 18. Then negative 12 minus 18 all over 18. Okay? Negative 12, positive 18, that's 6 over 18. That's 1/3. That's one answer. Negative 12, negative 18 is negative 30 over 18. That's a negative 5. Let's see, 5/3, negative 5/3. 6 goes into both of those numbers. And there's your answer. Okay, guys? So that's it. I'm pretty sure that's it. Yeah, that's it. What number was this? Number 16. It's number 17. Sorry if I did not tell you that, number 17. So, that's it. Yeah, that's it for the equations. So, guys, I have given you all the equations or inequalities that will be on the test. Now it's your job to say to yourself, self, is it linear, quadratic, absolute value, two variable linear system, three variable linear system, matrix equation, absolute value inequality, etc., etc. Okay? Please be able to look at all these equations and know the difference. Okay, now we're going to move on to a section on your test in which the directions will say evaluate and or simplify. Now the directions might not say that exact quote, but that's the basic gist. And we're going to look at, let me look at my notes here. We're going to look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 problems. 6 problems on this section where we're evaluating and or simplifying problems. Now, I think your notes will be more organized if we start your numbers over. And so instead of calling this 18, I'm going to call this 1. That way you know a new section has started, okay? Alright. So I'm telling you right now, x equals 2 and y equals 2, or negative 2, excuse me. We're going to substitute these values into the correct variable and then simplify. Are you ready? So it's called evaluating and simplifying. Or some of the problems, we're just going to simplify like this one. There's no evaluating. I'm sorry. I made a mistake and I'm very embarrassed about that, guys. I apologize. That's not what it's called at all. Would you please make note of this? It's called substitute. I don't know where I got the word evaluate from. Substitute and evaluate. Okay? So, some problems, A-U-T-E, some problems you're going to have to first substitute and then evaluate. This problem and this problem. This problem here, there's no substituting to do. You just evaluate. Okay? Alright. So here we go. Let's substitute and then evaluate. So, 4x squared. So I put a 4 and then parentheses for the x and then put 2. Then close your parentheses, then put the squared. And then negative, then put the parentheses. And for y, put negative 2. And then in the denominator I have 3x. So 3 times 2, then negative 2. Then parentheses for y, put negative 2. Then close the parentheses and put a squared. Now, don't let this big fraction overwhelm you. Simplify the top and then worry about the bottom later. So, do you multiply the 4 and the 2 first, or do you do your power first? Well, you do your power first. So I have 2 squared is 4, so I have 4 times 4. Because look, guys, I square the 2. 2 times 2 is 4, and they're multiplying right here. So I have 4 times 4, and then negative 2. Alright? I'm not worried about the denominator right now. I'm not worried about that. Now, 4 times 4 is 16. Negative times a negative is positive. So I end up with 18. 4 times 4 is 16. And there's like a 1 here. Negative 1 times negative 2. Positive 2. Positive 16, positive 2, positive 18. Now, down here I'm going to do my powers first. So I'll do my powers first. Negative 2 times. Now, square your negative 2 and negative 2 times a negative 2 is a positive 4. So I have negative 2 times positive 4. Okay? Now, 3 times 2 is positive 6. Negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. Okay? Simplify and you get negative 2. 18 over negative 2. Negative 9. If you want to put negative 9 over 1, I have no problem with that, okay? There's your answer. Go back and watch again if you need to, okay? Alright, problem number 2. Same thing, we're going to substitute and then evaluate. X equals negative 1. So I have 7, then parentheses for x, then negative 1. Okay, and then negative 8, then parentheses for x, negative 1. And then cubed. Now you do your powers first. So 7 times negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. Then bring down your negative 8 and do your powers. Negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1. Negative times a negative is positive times a negative is negative. And then 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. So negative 1 to the third power is negative 1. So I have a multiplication problem here and a multiplication problem here. Okay? 7 times 1 is 7. Negative 8 times negative 1, positive 8, positive 7 and positive 8, positive 15. And there we go. Okay? Substitute and evaluate now on number 3. Now let's move on to number 3. Here, we're just going to evaluate, okay? Always use order of operations, of course. Okay? So here we go. Alright, now, when I look at this, what's the first thing I do? Powers. So 12 divided by 3 times 2, and then plus 25. Now the next thing I'm going to do is all multiplication and division as I see it. See, some students think you do multiplication before you do division. That's not right. You go left to right, doing all multiplication or division as you see it. So here's division, and here's multiplication. So 12 divided by 3 is 4, and 4 times 2 is 8, positive 8, positive 25. And now combine your two terms here, your two numbers, and you get positive 33. Okay, students, not too bad. Okay, we're going to call this next problem number 4. Okay, number 4. Now, step 1, we can do our powers first. The problem is we don't know what the base is. You're first going to have to add these two numbers together to see what you're squaring. If you think you're squaring the 4 and the 3, you are incorrect. That is wrong, and you will miss the problem if you do that. If you put 9 and 16, you will miss the problem. You must first work inside the parentheses, okay? So bring down your 7, bring down your negative 3, and then right here inside the parentheses, put a 7, then bring down your squared, bring down your positive 8. There we go. Now, next, do you do your multiplication or do you do your powers? Well, you do your powers first, your exponent. So bring down your 7, bring down your negative 3. Don't forget that negative 3 is right next to the parentheses, so they're multiplying. So when you take the square of this, make sure you remember you're multiplying. 7 times 7 is 49, and then positive 8. Now, next you do all multiplication and division. Well, I see a multiplication problem here. So a negative 3 times a positive 49 is a negative, let's see, 27, carry your 2, 147. Then bring down your positive 8. Let me grab my calculator, make sure 3 times 49 is correct. Yes, it is. So a negative times a positive is negative. Now, let's combine all of our terms. I have a positive and a positive. That's a positive 15 and a negative 147. So in other words, you owe me $147. You pay off 15. You still owe me 132. So negative 132 is your answer. Alright, let's try another one. And actually, I told you there were 4 of those. Or I told you there were 6 of those. Let me check my notes again. I'm incorrect. There are 4. So that's it for that section, okay? So let's go back and review. I gave you 17 problems in your equation inequality section. Will be on your test. That doesn't mean I'm going to give you 17 problems in that section. I probably won't, but it'll be a good, thorough section. The next section is a substitute and evaluate section, or just evaluate, depending if you have to substitute or not. I gave you 4 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm going to give you, let me look at my notes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Hopefully I'm counting correctly. We're now going to do a graphing section on your test. So on your test, there'll be a graphing section. I'm going to give you 9 problems right now. Well, I'll probably run out of time in this video. We're going to start the 9 problems today, okay? So on your test, listen guys, here's the challenging part. Just like on your last set, your equation section, you have to look at the equations and recognize whether they're linear or quadratic or whatever type they are. Well, it's the same thing with graphing, guys. I'm going to give you a problem and you're going to have to recognize what type of problem it is and graph it correctly. We have linear graphs. There's a linear graph. By the way, how do I know they're linear graphs? Because all the powers of the variables are 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Here's a linear inequality. I know it's linear because my powers are 1 and 1. Same thing here, linear inequality. My powers are 1 and 1. Okay, here's an absolute value equation. And I know that because I have absolute value with an x on the inside. Here's a linear inequality system. Okay, here's a quadratic equation, quadratic inequality, and that's it for this section. Okay, so you're gonna have to recognize all of those. Okay, and it's very important you're able to do that. All right, here we go. So I'm going to start my numbers over again. I'm going to call this problem here problem number 1. Okay, so problem number 1, I want you to graph this using the double intercept method. And so here we go, students. First of all, let's review how to do the double intercept method. Remember, in order to graph a linear equation using the double intercept method, you put 0 in for x and you put 0 in for y. Okay, so when I put 0 in for x right here, I'm getting out the y-intercept. It's kind of the opposite. Okay, if you put 0 in for x, you're getting out the y-intercept. If you put 0 in for y, you're getting out the x-intercept. Okay, so there I put 0 in for x. Now I'm going to come down here, I'm going to put 0 in for y. Okay, guys, and so here we go. 2 times 0 is 0. Of course, 0 minus 4y is just negative 4y. Divide both sides by a negative 4. A positive 12 divided by negative 4 is a negative 3. So the y-intercept is negative 3. Don't forget this is your y-axis, x-axis. Now here we go. Negative 4 times 0 is 0. 2x minus 0 is 2x. Divide both sides by 2 and x equals 6. So your x-intercept is 6. And you're basically done. You go to the y-axis and put a point at the y-axis and put a point at negative 3. You go to the x-axis, put a point at 6, and then draw your line. I mean, it's really that simple. Very simple. So there it is. Okay, now I want you to know how to graph a linear equation using the slope-intercept method. Okay, slope-intercept method. So if you want some steps, here they are. Step 1, get y all by itself. Step 1, get y all by itself. So here we go. Or in other words, solve the equation for y. So first thing you do is bring the negative 3x over and make it a positive 3x. So you're left with negative 4y equals 16 positive 3x. Next, divide everything by negative 4. These cancel, leaving you with y. Positive 16 divided by negative 4 is a negative 4. Positive divided by a negative is negative. Now watch your sign here, students. A positive divided by a negative is negative, and 3 over 4 is just 3/4 x. Got it? Okay. So again, what is step 1? Get y all by itself. Now, let's come up here. Remember your constant term, your slope. I put it this way. Your slope is always the number next to your x. So this is your slope right here, negative 3/4, which is also your m. The constant term is your y-intercept, which is your b. Okay, so your b is negative 4. It's the constant term. The x coefficient is negative 3/4. That's your slope. Okay, now the next thing, we take this information right here and we graph the linear equation. So my y-intercept b is negative 4. Now we learned in the last problem that when you know the y-intercept, you go to the y-axis and put a point there. So if I know the y-intercept is negative 4, go to the y-axis and put a point there. Now my slope is negative 3/4, okay? Guys, we know the top number is what? Rise. The bottom number is what? Run. Now look, you can put the negative sign in the top or you can put it in the bottom. It doesn't matter, but do not put a negative sign in both the top and the bottom. That makes the whole fraction become positive, and you don't have a positive fraction, you have a negative fraction. 3 and over 4 to the right. And there's your line, okay? Pretty simple, not too difficult. We draw the line, okay? And there it is. Alright. Now, what if I would have gone, now watch, what if I would have put the negative sign here in the bottom? Okay, no problem, watch this. Start here at your y-intercept. Your rise number is positive, so go up 3. 1, 2, 3, okay? Now your run number's negative 4, so go over the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now look, is the line barely off a little bit? Yeah, because guys, I'm human, you're human. Your lines aren't going to be perfect, okay? But as you can see, whether you used this point here and this point here and drew your line, or whether you used this point here and this point here and drew your line, you still get the exact same line, okay? So it does not matter where you put the negative sign. Just put it in the top or the bottom, okay? And of course, if you have a positive fraction, if your slope is positive like this, then it really doesn't matter because both your numbers are positive, okay? Alright, this was number 2, I believe. Yes, number 1, number 2. And so this will be number 3 here, alright? And that's what we're going to pick up on our next video, right there, alright?